When most people think of the Old West, names like Wyatt Earp or Wild Bill Hickok come to mind. But if you're looking for a man who truly embodied the grit, honor, and quiet strength of the frontier, look no further than Seth Bullock. Lawman, businessman, and legend of Deadwood. Bullock wasn't just another gun-toting sheriff. He was the real deal, a man who brought law to chaos in order to the untamed edge of America. From staring down outlaws without flinching to becoming a trusted friend of Theodore Roosevelt, Bullock's story is one of principle over popularity, duty over drama, and trust us, you'll want to hear it. If you love true tales from the Old West, raw, rugged, and rooted in history, hit that subscribe button and saddle up. There's a whole frontier of stories waiting for you. Seth Bullock was a Canadian-born American who wore many hats in the American frontier. Over the course of his life, he served as a lawman, entrepreneur, politician, and federal officer. He became a key figure in the early days of Deadwood, South Dakota, where he settled in 1876 during the height of the Black Hills Gold Rush. Bullock quickly established himself in the local economy by opening a hardware store with his business partner, Saul Starr. As the town grew, so did Bullock's influence. He later built and operated the Bullock Hotel, one of Deadwood's first and most prominent luxury establishments. From frontier justice to frontier enterprise, Bullock played a central role in shaping Deadwood's transformation from a lawless mining camp into a thriving western town. Seth Bullock's early life. Much of Seth Bullock's early life remains obscured by time. What is known is that he was born in Amherstburg in what was then known as Canada West, today's Ontario, on the Canadian side of the Detroit River. His father, George Bullock, had served as a sergeant major in the British Army and was regarded as a local political figure in Sandwich, a nearby town that would later be incorporated into the city of Windsor in 1935. George Bullock's military background and political involvement gave the family some prominence, but their fortunes would not last. It has often been incorrectly assumed that Seth Bullock was related to British General Sir George Bullock. In fact, the general was born after Seth, making any direct relation impossible. Seth's mother, Agnes Findlay, was of Scottish descent. She died while her children were still young, leaving the family without a maternal figure at a critical time. By 1860, George Bullock was forced to resign from his role as county treasurer after public funds were found missing. To escape legal consequences, he fled across the border to Detroit, Michigan. His sudden departure left Seth and his 7 siblings alone in Sandwich. With both parents gone, his mother deceased and his father in exile, the Bullock children were left to fend for themselves. The family's property in Sandwich was lost soon after, either repossessed by creditors or auctioned off in 1863 due to George Bullock's unpaid debts and mortgage defaults. Seth's childhood was marked by hardship and strict discipline. His father was known for being harsh, often resorting to physical punishment for even minor misbehavior. The strained home environment drove Seth to run away, first at age 13 and again at 16, when he temporarily lived in Montana with his older sister, Jessie. By the time he turned 18, Seth Bullock had severed ties with his troubled upbringing and struck out on his own for good. Helena. In 1867, Seth Bullock settled in Helena, Montana Territory. That same year, he made an unsuccessful bid for a seat in the territorial legislature. Despite that initial setback, Bullock's political career advanced. As a member of the Republican Party, he was later elected to the Territorial Senate and served during the sessions of 1871 and 1872. During this time, he played a role in the early legislative efforts that ultimately led to the creation of Yellowstone National Park, established in 1872 as the first national park in the United States. In 1873, Bullock was elected sheriff of Lewis and Clark County, Montana. It was during his time in this role that he experienced his first deadly encounter in the line of duty. The incident involved a man named Clell Watson, who had been caught stealing a horse. When Bullock attempted to apprehend him, a gunfight broke out. Bullock was wounded in the shoulder, but he managed to subdue and arrest Watson. Watson was sentenced to be hanged, but the execution did not go as planned. A hostile mob surrounded the gallows and intimidated the official executioner into fleeing. In a bold move, Bullock mounted the scaffold himself and carried out the hanging by pulling the lever. He then stood his ground and dispersed the mob with a shotgun in hand. This dramatic moment would later be fictionalized in the HBO series Deadwood, though the show took creative liberties, placing Watson's hanging on the steps of the sheriff's office instead of a gallows. Shortly after this episode, Bullock partnered with longtime friend Sol Starr to open a hardware business. By August 1876, recognizing the economic potential of the booming gold rush town of Deadwood in Dakota Territory, they decided to expand. Upon arriving in Deadwood, Bullock and Starr purchased a parcel of land and launched their new venture. Initially, they operated out of a canvas tent under the name Starr and Bullock, auctioneers and commission merchants. As business grew, they replaced the tent with a permanent structure, becoming key figures in Deadwood's commercial development, Deadwood, South Dakota. In the summer of 1876, Deadwood was a rough and unregulated mining settlement. Law and order had yet to take root, and the town's rapid growth brought a mix of fortune seekers, gamblers, and opportunists. According to historians like John Ames, the real Deadwood, and Kenneth C. Keller, Seth Bullock, Frontier Marshal, Deadwood, just days after Seth Bullock and Sol Starr arrived in town, a tragic event shook the community. Wild Bill Hickok, one of the West's most recognizable figures, lost his life while seated at a poker table. The man responsible, Jack McCall, was brought before an informal camp court and surprisingly found not guilty. He was released shortly afterward and quickly departed Deadwood. However, McCall's legal troubles did not end there. He was later apprehended, given a formal trial under territorial law, convicted, and received a sentence of capital punishment. Hickok's untimely death underscored the town's urgent need for structured governance and reliable law enforcement. In response, the Dakota Territorial Legislature officially established Lawrence County in February 1877, encompassing Deadwood and the surrounding area. Soon after, Governor John L. Pennington appointed Seth Bullock as temporary county sheriff. His role was to oversee law enforcement until the region could hold its first official election. It's important to note that, despite many popular stories, Bullock was never the town marshal or sheriff of Deadwood itself. His jurisdiction covered the wider county. His service as acting sheriff lasted about 9 months. Bullock approached the position with seriousness and integrity. He selected a group of deputies from among local residents and focused on restoring order through firm, consistent leadership. His efforts were marked by restraint and a commitment to establishing a sense of stability without escalating tensions. One early episode during his tenure involved Dodge City Deputy Marshal Wyatt Earp, who had arrived in Deadwood and may have been seeking a role in local law enforcement. Bullock met with Earp and courteously informed him that the position was already filled. Within a week, Earp returned to Dodge City. Seth Bullock was known to have ongoing tensions with Al Swearingen, the influential owner of the Gem Theater, Deadwood's most well-known entertainment venue and brothel. Swearingen was a savvy businessman who made his fortune through vice-related enterprises and used his wealth to forge strong connections with many of the town's elite. After establishing a degree of stability and security in Deadwood, Bullock sent for his wife, Martha Eccles Bullock, and their young daughter, Margaret. They had been staying with Martha's parents in Michigan during Bullock's early efforts to settle the town. Once reunited in Deadwood, the family grew to include another daughter, Florence, and a son, Stanley. In November 1877, Lawrence County held its first official elections. Deadwood was designated as the county seat, and Bullock entered the race for sheriff as a candidate on the People's Party Republican ticket. His opponent was John J. Manning, representing the Democratic Party. Manning won the election, becoming the first individual formally elected as sheriff of Lawrence County. The following year, in 1878, Bullock once again ran for the position, this time as the standard Republican nominee, facing off against the incumbent, Manning. Just as in the previous election, Manning prevailed, securing a second term. Despite Bullock's respected standing and notable service within the community, he was unable to secure enough votes. It remains uncertain whether Bullock's losses at the ballot box were influenced by his strained relationship with Al Swearingen. Given Swearingen's sway over local politics and his ability to shape public opinion through both influence and alliances, it's a possibility that historians and researchers continue to consider. Seth Bullock and his business partner, Sol Star, purchased a piece of land at the confluence of Redwater Creek and the Belle Fourche River. They established the property as the S&B Ranch Company, which would become one of their major agricultural ventures in the region. In 1881, Bullock helped pioneer the introduction of alfalfa farming to the Dakota Territory, a move that contributed to the area's agricultural development and long-term sustainability. Beyond ranching, Bullock continued to diversify his interests. He served as a deputy U.S. Marshal and entered the grain business by partnering with Starr and Harris Franklin in operating the Deadwood Flooring Mill. At the same time, he made strategic investments in the mining sector, which was rapidly expanding and shaping the regional economy. Bullock and Starr's business network continued to grow, eventually reaching into nearby towns such as Spearfish, Sturgis, and Custer, further strengthening their commercial presence across the Black Hills. In 1884, while serving as a deputy sheriff based in Medora, North Dakota, Bullock met Theodore Roosevelt. The meeting occurred during Bullock's duties on the open range, near what would later become the town of Belle Fourche. Their interaction marked the beginning of a lasting friendship. Roosevelt, who greatly admired Bullock's character and leadership, once described him as a true Westerner, the finest type of frontiersman. In recognition of his service and integrity, Bullock was appointed U.S. Marshal for South Dakota in 1905 by President Theodore Roosevelt. He was reappointed to the same post in 1909 by President William Howard Taft, affirming his trusted role in federal law enforcement. Belle Fourche and the Bullock Hotel. Seth Bullock and Sol Star played a key role in shaping the economic landscape of western South Dakota. One of their most significant contributions came during the expansion of the Fremont, Elkhorn, and Missouri Valley Railroad in the late 1880s. At the time, the railroad was seeking a practical route through the region. The nearby town of Minnesota had initially been considered a likely location for the new railway line. However, a private land speculator had purchased the right-of-way near Minnesota and attempted to charge the railroad company an unreasonably high fee to cross his property. Seeing both the opportunity and the risk to the area's long-term development, Bullock and Starr stepped in. They offered the railroad company 40 acres of land, completely free of charge, for a right-of-way across their own property. This generous offer not only undercut the speculator, but also positioned Bullock and Starr as leaders in regional development. As a result, the railroad chose to build its line and depot 3 miles northwest of Minnesota. In 1890, this new station became the foundation for a brand new town, Belle Fourche. The name, meaning beautiful fork in French, referred to the confluence of nearby rivers and symbolized the new beginning Bullock and Starr were helping to create. To further encourage settlement and growth, Bullock and Starr offered free lots to residents willing to relocate from Minnesota to Belle Fourche. Their strategy worked. As businesses and families moved in, Belle Fourche rapidly expanded. Thanks to its strategic rail access and surrounding cattle ranches, Belle Fourche soon became the largest livestock shipping point in the United States by volume. In recognition of its growing importance, the Butte County seat was officially moved from Minnesota to Belle Fourche, a clear sign of the town's rising influence. Meanwhile, in Deadwood, Bullock and Starr faced a setback when their hardware store, one of the most established businesses in town, was lost to a fire in 1894. Rather than rebuild the same type of business, they saw an opportunity to serve the evolving needs of Deadwood's growing population. In its place, they constructed Deadwood's first luxury hotel. The new building was a 3-story, 63-room establishment that reflected both elegance and ambition. Named the Bullock Hotel, it quickly became a local landmark and a symbol of the town's transformation from rough mining camp to permanent settlement. Today, the Bullock Hotel still stands as one of Deadwood's historic treasures. It operates not only as a hotel, but also includes a casino, continuing the building's long tradition as a central part of the town's social and economic life. Later life and death. Seth Bullock's enduring friendship with Theodore Roosevelt opened new chapters in his public service career. both in military and civilian life. The two men who had first met in the Dakota Territory during the 1880s shared a strong bond rooted in mutual respect, frontier values, and a dedication to public duty. During the spring of 1898, as the United States prepared for conflict in the Spanish-American War, Congress authorized the formation of several volunteer cavalry units. Among them was Grigsby's Cowboy Regiment, officially known as the 3rd United States Volunteer Cavalry. This regiment was modeled in spirit and structure after Roosevelt's more famous Rough Riders. Bullock was commissioned as a captain in Troop A of Grigsby's regiment. Though the unit trained diligently at Camp Cuba Libre in Jacksonville, Florida, not Louisiana as sometimes reported, the war concluded before they were deployed overseas. As a result, the regiment never left training grounds, but Bullock retained the honorary rank of captain, reflecting both his leadership and commitment. Following Roosevelt's election as vice president under President William McKinley in 1900, he continued to rely on trusted individuals from his Western circle. Bullock was one of them. Recognizing Bullock's deep knowledge of the region and his conservation-minded approach to land use, Roosevelt appointed him as the first forest supervisor of the Black Hills Forest Reserve, later part of the Black Hills National Forest. This marked a significant moment in early U.S. forest management, part of Roosevelt's broader environmental agenda. When Roosevelt assumed the presidency in 1901, Bullock remained one of his close allies. In 1905, Bullock honored their friendship in a very public way by organizing a mounted delegation of 50 men to participate in Roosevelt's second inaugural parade. Among those who rode in Bullock's contingent was Tom Mix, who would later gain fame as a silent film cowboy and early Western movie star. The group, dressed in Western attire and riding horseback, served as a symbolic tribute to Roosevelt's cowboy roots and frontier legacy. That same year, Roosevelt appointed Bullock to a prestigious federal role, U.S. Marshal for South Dakota. Bullock served in this position for nearly a decade, overseeing federal law enforcement duties across the state with the same level of integrity and resolve that had characterized his earlier work. In 1917, as the United States prepared to enter World War I, Roosevelt proposed organizing a volunteer division of American troops for service in France. Though he was not granted permission to lead the unit himself, he handpicked 18 trusted individuals to serve as officers in what was known as the Roosevelt Division, or Roosevelt's World War I volunteers. Seth Bullock was among this select group, alongside notable figures such as famed scout Frederick Russell Burnham, conservationist and politician James R. Garfield, son of President James A. Garfield, and Louisiana politician John M. Parker. Though the unit was ultimately never mobilized due to administrative and political decisions in Washington, Bullock's inclusion was another testament to Roosevelt's faith in his leadership and loyalty. In the final years of his life, Seth Bullock remained closely connected to national service and the legacy of his lifelong friend, Theodore Roosevelt. When the United States entered World War I in 1917, Congress passed legislation granting Roosevelt the authority to organize up to 4 volunteer divisions for military service, modeled in spirit after the famed Rough Riders of the Spanish-American War. Despite this congressional approval, President Woodrow Wilson, as commander-in-chief, ultimately decided not to activate the volunteer units. Citing concerns about military coordination and the use of professional forces, Wilson declined to commission Roosevelt's volunteer divisions, leading to their quiet disbandment before deployment. Although Bullock and many others were prepared to serve, the effort came to an end without formal recognition. Following Roosevelt's death in January 1919, Bullock sought to honor his friend's enduring legacy in a lasting and meaningful way. With the support of the Black Hills Pioneers, an organization of early settlers, Bullock led an initiative to construct a permanent memorial in the hills they had both cherished. The site selected for the tribute was Sheep Mountain, located just a few miles from Deadwood. On July 4, 1919, symbolically chosen for its patriotic significance, a stone monument to Roosevelt was officially dedicated. The mountain was also renamed Mount Roosevelt in his memory. The site remains one of the earliest tributes to the 26th president and reflects the deep personal connection Bullock felt toward him. Sadly, Bullock's own health began to decline shortly after the dedication. He passed away on September 23, 1919, at his residence on Van Buren Street in Deadwood. The cause was colon cancer, an illness he had battled quietly. Seth Bullock was laid to rest in Mount Moriah Cemetery, the same historic burial ground that is home to other legendary figures of the Old West, including Wild Bill Hickok and Calamity Jane. However, unlike the more centrally located graves in the main section of the cemetery, Bullock's burial site was set apart, more than 750 feet up a steep hill facing Mount Roosevelt. The placement was intentional. Bullock had requested that his final resting place overlook the memorial to his friend, symbolizing their lasting bond and shared frontier values. His gravesite remains a place of quiet reflection for those who visit Deadwood and remember the men who shaped the American West. Seth Bullock wasn't just another figure riding through the pages of frontier history. He was a builder, a leader, and a symbol of what the West could become when courage met character. From taming lawless Deadwood to preserving the Black Hills and earning the lifelong respect of Theodore Roosevelt, Bullock lived a life carved from integrity, not legend. In a time when the West was wild and uncertain, Seth Bullock didn't just survive, he helped shape civilization from its chaos. If there ever was a man who defined what it meant to be a true frontiersman, it was him. Like stories of grit, and true Western greatness, hit that subscribe button and ride with us through the untamed tales of the American Old West. There's a whole lot more where this came from.